Hello, and welcome to This Is Monsters. If you don't already know, this show is produced with seasons that are themed, and we're currently on Season 18, Killer Kids. I figured I'd add a little opening to the episodes to make sure everyone knows the theme, and to make sure YouTube knows the narration isn't AI. If you enjoy the channel, not necessarily the crimes, you can hit like on the video and subscribe for weekly stories. You can also check out my other channel, Somewhere Sinister, which is not entirely true crime, but true crime adjacent. A link is in the description. Thanks so much. In 2016, two 14-year-olds had become obsessed with the Twilight film series. They saw the main characters as surrogates representing their own struggle to be together. See, these teens had started dating, but nobody wanted them to be together. Not their friends, and especially not their families. People were trying to force them apart, but like Bella and Edward, they believed they were destined to be together, and nothing, not even death, would stop their love. But Twilight is a movie. It's fiction, and movies don't make people kill. People decide to do that all on their own. This is Monsters. Elizabeth Joyce, who went by Liz, was born around 1967 in Edinburgh. She eventually moved south of Scotland and had her first child at 23, a girl named Mary. That was around 1990, and the details about Mary's father aren't available, but eventually Liz married a man named Pete Edwards, and they would have their first child together on June 13, 2001. Her name was Kim Edwards, and despite Liz and Pete not having a great relationship, they had a second child about a year and a half later. She would be Kim's younger sister, Katie Edwards. Only months after the birth of Katie, Pete left. He was described by some, including Liz's oldest daughter Mary, as a violent man. Many say the split was a mutual decision, but afterward Liz didn't want her children to be in contact with him. She believed he would be a bad influence on the girls. Liz ended up taking care of her three daughters completely alone. Over the years, the relationship between Liz and Kim was in a constant state of distress. Kim grew up believing that her mother favored Katie and developed a fantasy that her father was a really great guy who would have made her life better if he was around. The mother and daughter would fight constantly, and in one rare instance in 2008, Liz ended up hitting Kim in the face. Liz was not known to abuse her children, but during the fight over a broken television, she just snapped and struck Kim in the jaw. Liz ended up contacting social services herself, admitting to the assault and seeking help. Kim ended up being taken away and put into a foster home for 4 months. When Kim came back to live at home, she would repeatedly complain about her life and say she wanted to go back and live with her foster mother. By the time of that incident, Liz had moved the family to a town called Spalding, about 100 miles or 160 kilometers north of London. At the time, Spalding was said to have had one of the lowest crime rates in the UK, and Liz thought it would make a great place to raise her kids. She got a job as a dinner lady, which people call a lunch lady, lunch aide, or school cook in other places. It's a person who works for the school serving meals to children. Liz worked at the local primary school, and people say the children there really liked her. Her co-workers said she was positive, optimistic, and pleasant to be around. The family of 4 lived in a semi-detached 2-story house on Dawson Avenue, just 3 blocks away from the primary school. It wasn't a big place, but it was a friendly little neighborhood and was within walking distance to the school and shopping. Kim saw a social worker regularly due to her time in foster care. She would vent about her mother, making her seem like the worst person in the world. She repeatedly made claims that Liz was physically abusing her, but the incidents were never found to be credible. The social worker referred Kim to a mental health provider. Kim's conversations with the counselor became increasingly focused on her younger sister, Katie. After the crime, when investigators went through Kim's journals, they would find many of her rants repeated there. Katie was her mother's favorite. Katie was the golden girl. It didn't help that Katie was seen as an outgoing and happy kid. Liz did a lot of volunteer work with her church, and Katie helped a lot. Katie also regularly performed in the church's theater productions. Kim started attending the Sir John Gleed School less than a mile away from their home. It was there in September of 2013 that Kim met Lucas Markham. Lucas was also born on August 1, 2001, and his mother died from cancer when he was only 5 years old. His father was an abusive drinker, and like Kim, Lucas had also been temporarily placed in a foster home. He and his brothers were eventually sent to live with their aunt in Spalding. A neighbor said that, even when quite young, Lucas was a vandal and swore a great deal. He was also regularly seen outside riding his bike at midnight when he was only 11 years old. It was clear that Lucas was troubled and likely not getting an adequate amount of supervision. One of his brothers was said to also be violent and would fight with Lucas frequently. By high school, he lived in the same neighborhood as Kim and was also attending the Sir John Gleed School. Kim may have never noticed Lucas if he hadn't gotten angry in English class and threw a chair. The outburst got her attention, and it's possible his troubled behavior attracted her as another troubled youth. It would take another couple years for them to actually get to know each other, but both having lost a parent and being in the foster system likely created a pretty strong bond pretty quickly. Having both felt like outcasts prior to meeting, now it seemed like the other was the only person who really understood them. Their connection was fast and intense. When he asked her out in 2015, she quickly said yes. Lucas wasn't what most high school girls would consider an ideal boyfriend. He was a little goofy looking and he certainly gave off a creepy vibe. On top of that, he obviously had anger issues, an example being the incident when he threw a chair. Over the years that followed, his outbursts wouldn't stop. It seemed odd that Kim started dating him because, at that point, despite having a lot of internal animosity, other kids at school viewed Kim as pretty normal. She hung out with other girls after school, went shopping, and could be fairly outgoing. According to her friends at school, she and Lucas were an odd pair, but soon Kim would change to better match her boyfriend. She withdrew from friends and began spending all of her time with Lucas. The couple only wanted to spend time with each other, being annoyed if they had to do anything else. The high school romance quickly turned to obsession. The problem with that obsession was that there were people who didn't want them to be together, mainly Liz. Kim's mother was pretty religious and felt like Kim was too young for a serious boyfriend. With Kim being only 13 at the time, many would agree, religious or not. She was also afraid that Kim would get pregnant, which was another justified fear for your 13-year-old daughter. Outside of that, like many other people, Liz just didn't like Lucas. The other kids at school weren't wrong, he was just creepy. Liz wasn't alone because her oldest daughter, Mary, who was in her early 20s by then, also didn't like Lucas. And on top of that, neighbors of the Edwards ladies also expressed their dislike of Kim's boyfriend. It seemed that Kim was the only person who wasn't creeped out by Lucas Markham. Like many angst-filled teens, though, the fact that Liz wanted Kim to stop seeing Lucas only made her positive that he was the right person for her. If her mother didn't want her to be with Lucas, then that was the only person she wanted to be with. But not liking Lucas was not all Liz would do about the situation. In October of 2015, Kim and Lucas made a plan to run away together. Liz didn't like when Kim brought Lucas over and Lucas had gotten detention, so the next logical step for the 13-year-olds was to leave home, with no money or way of making money. It wasn't a well-thought-out plan. Kim called her mother and left a voicemail stating that she didn't want to be part of the family anymore. Then they packed up a tent and some food and headed out into the woods where they camped. They stayed out there for 6 days, during which time Kim's mother and Lucas's aunt reported them missing. On day 6, someone spotted them in the woods and the police finally showed up and returned them to their families. Liz grounded Kim and from that point banned Lucas from their house. That was obviously not something that Kim was just going to accept, though. As far as she was concerned, Lucas was her soulmate and nothing would stand in the way of them being together. If Liz was going to insist on keeping them separated, then she would have to be eliminated. Unfortunately for Liz, Kim and Lucas were still able to see each other since they went to the same school and lived relatively close together. At school, Lucas began telling other students that Kim's mother needed to die. Of course, most high school kids wouldn't take that kind of talk seriously. His girlfriend's mother was keeping them apart, so he was frustrated, but he surely wasn't going to kill anybody. Except the other kids at his school didn't realize how much his obsession with Kim had grown. During their brief stay in the woods, he had gotten a taste of what it would be like for the two of them to be together, on their own, with nobody telling them what to do. It was a feeling he would do anything to get back. Around that time, Liz started dating a man named Graham Greene, though he worked in transportation and his job took him away from home frequently, so he wasn't at the house in Spalding often. When he was there, he quickly developed a good relationship with Katie, which likely angered Kim. But the reason Katie got along with everyone so easily was because she was open to it. Kim didn't want to be friends with her mother or their neighbors or Graham, so she pushed them away. Graham obviously didn't think Kim would murder anyone, he just assumed she was a moody teenager and would eventually grow out of it. Unsurprisingly, when he finally met Lucas, like everyone else, he didn't like him. Graham would later say Lucas had bad body odor and poor personal hygiene. In March of 2016, Kim took a handful of painkillers and overdosed. She spent a couple of days in the hospital and recovered. She told Liz that she was depressed because she wasn't able to see Lucas. Lucas was relieved that she survived, and the incident actually made them become even closer. They both knew that they couldn't live without the other, which meant they really would have to do anything to stay together. Around that same time, Kim's father, Pete, tracked her down on social media and reached out to her. When Liz found out, she was angry and told Kim that if she wasn't careful, she would end up just like him, an irresponsible druggie. Kim took that as her mother calling her worthless, even though Liz tried to explain that she was only trying to protect her. She didn't want her daughter to communicate with Pete at all, which essentially banned Kim from both her boyfriend and her father. After that, the rift between them only got bigger. After another argument, Kim left home and went to Lucas's house, which was just down the street, and they locked themselves in his bedroom. They were in the bedroom until the following afternoon when family members forced the door open and dragged him out of the room. Lucas's grades at school had plummeted and his family was also trying to keep him away from Kim. They knew that his obsession with her had grown to concerning levels and believed that them being together was not good for either of them. When Kim returned home, she found out that Liz had cleared her stuff out of the room she shared with Katie. It was punishment for running away again, I guess making her stay in a bare room without her stuff. It seemed that the mother had spoken to Lucas's aunt because she did the same thing. She cleared all of Lucas's personal items from his room and left him with the bare essentials. It was the final straw for Kim, and she would eventually say that she felt like she was no longer part of the family. For the pair, who were both 14 by them, it was easy to still see each other though. They had to be let out of the house for school and they lived right down the street from each other. Still, their resentment of those who were trying to keep them apart was strong, and there was no one they resented more than Liz. To them, she had started all the trouble and they would have to go to extremes to finally be free. During their clandestine meetings at McDonald's or walking up and down the Coronation Channel, they talked about what they should do. Lucas would later say during his interrogation, quote, "She always hated her mom, and I said I wish I could kill her, and she said yeah and thought I was joking, but I was serious. Then she realized I was being serious, so she started being serious." They eventually came up with a plan to murder Liz and Katie. Mary was living in Derby with her husband and children and never seemed to have been a target of Kim's rage. People said that Kim actually got along with Katie well and aren't sure why she wanted to kill her, but she was still seen as the favorite in Kim's eyes, so her jealousy must have gotten the better of her. Then their plan was to end their own lives. Well, what the hell is the point of that? If you're claiming that you need to kill someone in order to be with your soulmate, then not being alive kinda defeats the purpose. If that's your plan, then you're only killing Liz and Kate out of anger. Not that we should be expecting rationality from two troubled 14-year-olds. It would turn out that they wouldn't carry out the second part of their plan, and it's unknown what their plans were at that point after the murder. Were they so delusional that they thought they could commit murder and then live happily ever after? Some people thought that might be the case. In 2014, a man named Warren Free, who lived in Spalding, was beaten to death by a group of teenagers outside his house. He had confronted the group of youths, 2 girls aged 15, 2 boys aged 15, a 17-year-old boy and an 18-year-old man, and accused them of vandalizing his fence. The group attacked him and beat him, one of them using a metal pole. He was able to walk back to his house but later died of his injuries. Warren's son Adam Free went to school with Lucas, and when the troubled teen learned about the murder, he became obsessed. An important detail of that story is that the group of teens were acquitted of the crime and were not punished in any way. That gave Lucas the impression that youth made him able to do whatever he wanted without consequences. Lucas was heard claiming to have been one of the teens who was involved in the attack, and people said he thought the entire thing was funny. The murder of Elizabeth and Katie Edwards didn't happen on the first attempt. On 2 consecutive nights, Lucas grabbed some knives from the kitchen, snuck out of his house, and tapped on the window of the Edwards home. There was no answer. Both of those nights, Kim had fallen asleep before Lucas made it over. Imagine having planned the murder of your mother and sister, and on the night it was supposed to happen, you're so relaxed that you fall asleep. Those are little details that fascinate me about these stories. Yes, murdering anyone is horrible. Murdering your own family in their sleep is arguably even worse. But to be so at peace with the idea that you can easily drift off to sleep is a whole other level of monsterism. On the 3rd attempt, April 13, 2016, Kim managed to stay awake, and when Lucas came a tap-in, she opened a bathroom window and let him in. Lucas opened the bag he brought with him and showed the knives to Kim, who picked out a large butcher knife. Their prearranged plan was for Lucas to kill Liz and for Kim to kill Katie, but the teen said she couldn't do it. She told Lucas that he would have to kill them both, and the boy seemed to have no problem with that. He was completely under the spell of his obsession with Kim. He would do anything she wanted him to do. In Lucas's damaged mind, Liz had become his enemy, and he couldn't wait to kill her. He took the knife that Kim had picked out, and the pair went upstairs and into Liz's room. She had worked that day and had to work in the morning, so she was understandably fast asleep. Kim and Lucas had decided ahead of time that they would target her throat first so she wouldn't be able to call for help. That was exactly what he did. He thrusted the knife into her throat, then climbed on top of her and stabbed her over and over. Kim had left the room at first so she didn't have to watch, but she changed her mind and re-entered the room. There was blood everywhere, on the walls, on the bed, on Lucas. He then grabbed a pillow and smothered Liz until she stopped moving. Once Liz was dead, Kim would later say that she felt relief. Then the couple turned and went into Katie's room. The 13-year-old was also fast asleep, probably believing, like children all around the world, that she was safe and sound in her own bed, in her own home. Little did she know that she lived with the monster who would ultimately end her life. Lucas carried out the murder the same way he murdered the girl's mother. He stabbed her in the throat and then smothered her with a pillow. Kim wasn't in the bedroom for that murder, not because she had any sort of human emotions. She would later say that she just didn't like the smell of blood, obviously. Once the killing was done, Kim and Lucas took a bath to wash off all the blood. Then Kim put on a set of Minions pajamas and the couple went back into the bedroom where Katie's dead body still lay and pulled Kim's mattress off the bunk beds in the shared bedroom. They dragged it downstairs to the living room where they proceeded to have sex before they watched their favorite movie, Twilight. In fact, it's believed that they watched all 4 films in the series while they ate tea cakes and ice cream. I haven't seen any of the Twilight movies, so I apologize if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, the main characters in the movie believe their love is bigger than anything else. They're willing to do anything to be together. In the movie, the main characters also take refuge together in the woods, not unlike when Kim and Lucas had previously run away together. Twilight was a story that really spoke to Kim and Lucas. They went into the shed and retrieved some bottles of alcohol, which Lucas would later say was meant to be used to wash down some pills, but that part of the plan never materialized. Instead, they laid in the living room, eating junk food, watching movies, having sex, and seemingly not caring that there were 2 corpses in the house with them. The first person to feel that something was wrong was Lucas's aunt. He hadn't come home for over a day, and so she went down the street and knocked on the door of the Edwards house, but there was no answer. She went back home and reported her nephew missing. Liz's boyfriend Graham started getting concerned when he wasn't able to reach Liz for more than a day. He had expressed concern about Lucas and was worried the boy might have done something. When police began looking into Lucas's disappearance, they learned that neither him, Kim, or Katie had shown up for school that day and that Liz had not shown up for work. Liz had served meals to children at the primary school for years, and it was completely out of character for her to just not show up. With that information, police went down the street to her house on Dawson Avenue. The officers knocked and of course got no answer. Kim and Lucas had apparently decided that they were just going to ignore the situation they had gotten themselves into. An officer broke a window to gain entry into the house, and when they were inside, they found Kim and Lucas lying on a mattress in the living room. They didn't even look up from the television when the officers walked in. One of them asked where Mrs. Edwards was, and Lucas responded, quote, "Go upstairs and see for yourself." Upstairs, the officers found the bodies of Liz and Katie exactly where they had been killed. When officers arrested the two teens, they showed no emotion. They didn't seem to care at all that they had murdered two people and were being arrested, likely going to prison. Kim in particular didn't seem to care that it was her own mother and sister who had been killed. They didn't try to get away with it. They just did it and then moved on with their lives like it was completely insignificant. Over the next few days, the media was left to only speculate about the murders. Due to Kim and Lucas being minors, their names were withheld initially. The news originally reported that the murders were carried out by two young boys, which obviously wasn't true. Mary eventually posted to social media blaming Kim and Lucas for the deaths of her mother and her half-sister. Just like everybody else, she wouldn't have been given the names of the minor perpetrators, but it wouldn't have been difficult for her to figure it out. Knowing the history of conflict at her mother's house and knowing that Kim had been arrested, it didn't take a genius to put the puzzle pieces together. An autopsy revealed that Kim had 8 stab wounds. 5 were defensive wounds on her hands, 2 on her neck and 1 on her shoulder. Her windpipe had been severed, and the medical examiner determined that she had struggled for a while before being smothered, though she died due to blood loss from a severed carotid artery. Katie had 2 stab wounds to the neck and also had been smothered. Neither was a quick, painless death. The medical examiner revealed that Katie had a damaged vertebrae, a result of the immense force used by Lucas when he stabbed her. Kim would go on to claim that her mother and sister were killed quickly so they didn't suffer, and Lucas would claim that he only stabbed Katie once by slipping the knife into her neck without much force. Both of those claims were proven untrue by the autopsy. When the teens were first interviewed, they didn't really talk, but eventually, after being separated, they openly described the murders. When Kim was asked why they killed her mother, she said, quote, "Just that, well, ever since, I was young, I never got on with my mom. I knew that she favored my sister more than me, and even though she said that she didn't, I knew that she was lying. I was okay with it, the fact that it happened so quick. It gave me peace of mind because, now, it wasn't like torture or anything." She said she was actually relieved that her mother and sister were dead because now Liz didn't have to deal with her. She said Katie wouldn't have to deal with any more heartbreak in life and she wouldn't have to mourn the death of her mother. Kim told the investigators that she was waiting in the bathroom while Lucas committed the murder, then said she went into her mother's bedroom. During her interview, she described the murder with no emotion.
She was laying on her side, and I don't know really how he stabbed her, but he stabbed her through the neck, I think, through that way, because she was on the side.
Okay.
I went into the room to see what was going on because I heard noises and stuff, so I just wanted to check if he was okay. He was on top of her, with a pillow over her head, just even though her voice box and that was she I thought I heard her say "get off me," but I'm not entirely sure. Then after about 10 minutes of Lucas putting his weight on her, like she was dead.
She also described her mother reaching out for her hand and, thinking it was Lucas's hand, she took hold, then pushed it away when she realized it was Liz's. The craziest thing about her statement was that, while her boyfriend, who was 5 foot 10 inches or 177 centimeters by the time he was 14, was stabbing her mother, she went into the room to make sure he was okay. These two kids had developed a cult-level obsession with each other. Kim went on to tell investigators that they didn't carry out the second part of their plan because they were supposed to wash down pills with alcohol, but she didn't like the smell of the alcohol. So, brutally stabbing your mother and sister is cool, but drinking something you don't like the smell of is out of the question? Like most monsters who plan to kill someone else and then themselves, they were never really serious about actually taking the final step of their plan. When Lucas learned that Kim was talking to investigators, he became annoyed, but he begrudgingly decided to also talk. He described stabbing Liz and Katie to death like he was recounting a baseball game.
She looks out the window, sees me there, she waves, I put my thumbs up, and then she goes to the bathroom window.
Okay, and what happens then?
She opens the bathroom window, I pass my bag through, I get through, and then she opens my bag, and I take a knife out, and I pass her a knife. I don't even know why I did that, just to make sure. And she holded the knife, but never used the knife. The knife is still in the bathroom with the other knives. And then I went into her mum's room, stabbed her in the neck where she was asleep on her side, and smothered her face with a pillow. And after I knew she was gone, I went into Katie's room, which is the same room as Kim's, and I thought I stabbed her, but I'm not 100% sure if it was like her on the mattress. And then I smothered her face with a pillow too.
That was the beginning of the end of Kim and Lucas's unbreakable love. They were so in love and determined to be together that they were willing to commit murder. But almost immediately after being taken into custody, they lost interest in each other. Lucas was completely honest with the authorities and didn't try to make it seem like the victims died quickly. He said it took about 3 minutes to kill Liz and that she struggled. He had scratch marks on his face from her fingernails. That was when he claimed he had slid the knife into Katie's neck, then pushed a pillow over her face, and that she didn't struggle. The detail about the stab wounds would later be contradicted by the medical examiner's report. Both Kim and Lucas pleaded not guilty to murder and attempted to plead guilty to manslaughter. That was understandably rejected by the prosecution. They had spent weeks planning the murders and had even made 2 failed attempts prior to when they finally carried them out. There is not a shadow of a doubt that this was a case of premeditated murder, and they would stand trial for just that. Of course, their defense was going to try and claim that both teens were not of sound mind. That meant that Kim and Lucas would both have to undergo an evaluation of their mental state. Though Kim continued to tell authorities that she was glad her mother was dead, she did show a tiny sliver of remorse for the death of Katie, saying that she missed her. It was very minor, but it was there. The biggest problem with using any sort of diminished capacity defense was the fact that the murders had been meticulously planned out ahead of time. It wasn't like Kim killed her mother in a sudden rage after a lifetime of abuse. No, there was no evidence of abuse by her mother outside of the one assault. Her grievance with Liz was minor, but still she found someone else who was willing to commit murder and then planned out that murder. They specifically planned to first stab their victim in the throat in order to stop them from screaming. They planned for Lucas to bring knives and a change of clothes to Kim's house the night of the murder. After that, they had days to reconsider their actions, but they still slowly and deliberately carried out that murder. Kim also started to tell people that Lucas had manipulated her, and by then she didn't really care what happened to him. Of course, experts who evaluated their relationship believed that Kim was the dominant of the two. She was the one who wanted her mother and sister dead, and Lucas was willing to do anything to make her happy. The very fact that he had done what she wanted and now she was ready to discard him was evidence of that behavior. She didn't need Lucas anymore because, after the arrest, she was showered with attention. She was the focus of everyone in the area: police, lawyers, media, doctors. They all wanted to talk to her and figure her out, and she loved it. She even talked about writing a book about herself. Then their relationship soured even further when Lucas decided to plead guilty to murder. That made Kim feel betrayed, even though she had already said she didn't care what happened to him. To Lucas's defense, it was the best option as there was no evidence that the teen had any diminished capacity. Pleading guilty could possibly get him a lighter sentence. Kim remained unwilling to plead guilty, and her trial started in October of 2016 at Nottingham Crown Court. Since Lucas had actually carried out the murders and had pleaded guilty, the prosecutor argued that Kim was just as responsible for the murders as the main instigator of the plan. She planned out the murders ahead of time, allowed the killer access to the victims, and stood by, doing nothing while they were murdered. That made her equally culpable for the murders. During her police interview, she even told the investigator that Lucas had asked her multiple times if she was sure she wanted her mother and sister dead, and she said yes every time. Kim's defense tried to prove that she had a mental disorder that caused her to not be responsible for her actions. He pointed out that a psychiatrist had diagnosed Kim with an adjustment disorder. That's when someone, most commonly a child, has adverse effects to change in their life. It's not uncommon for life-changing events to cause distress for children, but an adjustment disorder is when the reactions are considered excessive or unhealthy. What major life event that Kim was reacting to that caused her to kill her mother and sister is unclear. Her father had left 12 years ago. They had lived in the same house for 10 years and she went to the same school system. Her mother had met her new boyfriend 10 months before the murder. It could have been that she was not allowed to see her boyfriend, but she was. Her mother didn't want her to, but she saw Lucas every day at school and after school. They lived right down the street from each other. The idea that Kim had murdered 2 people due to an adjustment disorder was a complete stretch. When a forensic psychiatrist testified for the prosecution, he said, quote, "I disagree with the diagnosis, and even if she had some form of adjustment disorder, it had no link to the killing. She was not suffering from an adjustment disorder, nor was she suffering from any other psychiatric condition. She might have lashed out, but it would have been an outburst, an uncontrolled act. But I've never heard of a case of a planned killing as a result of an adjustment disorder." This is the case with many murderers who try to use some form of mental disorder as a reason they aren't responsible for their actions. Nobody is saying that someone who kills another person is completely rational, but the mental disorder they're claiming would cause them to lose control in the moment and commit violence ending in death. They never cause someone to slowly and meticulously plan out a murder. Pre-planning usually involves in getting away with it, and that means you know what you're doing is wrong. The prosecution also read a transcript of Kim's police interview where she stated that she had felt like murdering for quite a while. There was no question that Kim was involved in the murder, so the jury was left with the decision of whether or not she had been mentally compromised. It wasn't a tough decision, as the jury only took 30 minutes to come back with a guilty verdict. Unfortunately, due to the murderers' young ages, they would not be expected to spend a long time in prison, at least not for such a heinous crime. The sentencing happened in November of the same year, and by then, the passionate romance of prior years was completely gone. They didn't even glance at each other while standing in court awaiting their sentences to be handed down. The judge listed a number of aggravating factors that would apply to his sentencing, including the fact that the murder was pre-planned and that the victims were sleeping and vulnerable. He then sentenced both of the teens to life with a minimum of 20 years. It was the maximum sentence he was able to give. Once the sentence was given, Kim dabbed tears from her eyes, finally showing some emotion regarding the entire case. She was finally sad when something negatively affected her. Now, 20 years is a long time, and that was only when they would be eligible for release. But for the premeditated murders of 2 people butchered in their sleep, it still felt light. That would get even worse when on appeal both Kim and Lucas had their sentences reduced to 17.5 years. The appeals court stated that they should have gotten credit for admitting to the crime whether or not they pleaded guilty. Again, that will only be when they're eligible for release, but if they behave well in prison, the UK is not known to be harsh on crime. They could be released when they're in their 30s, in which case they will be given new identities for their own protection. If that happens, they do have a court order to never be in contact, but it's not like they were really interested in following the law before they were sent to prison. Only time will tell what will happen to the teens in the future and whether or not we'll see them again in the news. Though it's true that the brains of 14-year-olds are not fully developed and they could change for the better as they mature, there have been many people who have committed evil acts in their teens and never stopped as they became adults. We can only hold out hope for Kim Edwards and Lucas Markham, but there's no guarantee. Children committing murder is the theme of this season, and so this question will be raised often. Will these murderers get released and become productive members of society, or are they doomed to remain monsters forever? If you're a fan of true crime, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. You can also hit like or leave us a comment. You can check out our other show, Somewhere Sinister, on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to support the show, check out our merchandise at thisismonsters.com. The link is in the description. Thanks again, and be safe.